If you've never used text animators in After Effects before because they scramble your brain, get ready to embrace them. Today we're going to create procedural kinetic type using, yes, text animators. Then we'll look at how you can add shape layers and footage and a sound bed of audio clips to create a looping collage style animation. Hi, I'm Bennett. You may know me online as the Video Shop.
What?
I'm a motion designer and After Effects teacher. Film's my life, and so is imposter syndrome. I thought it might be fun to combine all those things.
You see anybody having fun here?
So I'm thrilled to be here at School of Motion talking about this with you. And if you want to follow along, be sure to download the free working files from the link below. Okay, let's get started. Before we proceed, I need to give a shout out to Juan Lugo. He kindly let me base my design on his style of illustration. His work is sublime, so do check it out. I usually find it's easier to get your head around text animators by looking at something like this, with the letters animated on the y-axis rather than the x. But if you're already familiar with them, feel free to skip to the next chapter. This will be a super quick crash course. So to add a text animator, we just untoggle our layer here, and you'll see that you've got animate and this play icon. If for any reason you can't see that, it could be that you've got all of your panels hidden. So you can turn your panels on and off with these icons at the bottom left here. If they're all off, then you won't see that. So just make sure that at least one of them is on. Then we'll click on the play icon and then go up to position. So what that does is it gives us an animator and a range selector for that animator. And then we've got our position value here. So if we set that to be 400 on the Y, it's going to drop our letters down. And then if we go into our range selector, so if you're wondering what a range selector is, it's the range of the text that we're going to be animating. We can adjust that range here with the start and end values. And we can also just grab the icons in the comp window here and do it that way. So I'm going to leave those values at 0 and 100 and then go into advanced. We'll change the shape from square to ramp up. We'll look at the other shapes later. We can animate the offset, so at the moment we've got it at 0. If we set that to be minus 100 and then set a keyframe, we'll go to frame 20, then set that to be 100 and then just set the end of our work area, have a look at that. So obviously that's linear, very basic. We can add ease in here with these percentage values. So if we just go into the middle here, and then if we bump the ease high up to 100, so that's ease in out, we preview that, so the letters are snapping into place. And then if we bump the ease low up to 100, then we've got this animation. So we'll explore these other options more throughout the lesson, but hopefully if you're new to text animators, you're starting to see the potential. And the good thing is they kind of work like shape layers. So we've now got a group here that we can sort of turn on or off, and you may have multiple groups in one text layer. Congratulations, you've graduated from the School of Motion Text Animators crash course. Drive carefully, folks. Now we'll create this looping kinetic type. We'll animate the type with text animators, then add them to paths. Finally, we'll make them 3D layers and add these accents. I've got a 1920 by 1080 comp, 24 frames a second. I'm using film clips, so that's a good frame rate to work to, and a duration of 10 seconds. And just going to change the background color. Add a text layer, and I'm going to change the typeface. I actually only just found out working on this video that you can favorite typefaces, so that's handy. We're going to use Nazar Exuberant Regular. It's available on the Adobe Fonts website, and if typefaces were people, I think it would be this guy. I just love the name. So let's change this to an off black. I'm going to change the justification to left and the size to 100. I'm going to add a text animator to the position. So minus 2000 on the X. Go into advanced, set that to be ramp down. So drag the offset over to 100, set a keyframe. I'm going to change this to frames by control clicking here, and then go over to frame 30, and then set that to be minus 100. And then set the ease low to be 100. So I'm going to rename this animator to be on. So it's just good housekeeping, and you may have more than one folder on a text layer. I say folder, probably group is more accurate, but you know what I mean. So we've got our letters animating on. To have them animate off, we can just duplicate this folder and we'll rename this off. So rather than do everything from scratch, I'm going to turn this one off. That's confusing, I know. So we want them to animate off to the right. So I'm going to change the position to be 2000 and then go in and change the shape to be ramp up and then offset these keyframes. So if we turn this one on, so we've got them animating on and then animating off. So I want some subtle continuous motion on the letters. What I'm going to do is add a tracking property, call this tracking. So here I'm not going to go into the range selector, I'm just going to keyframe the tracking from 0 to 30 over the same duration. So this is what that looks like. So I want these letters to just come in a little bit sooner. We can still easy ease these keyframes now. So if I press U, I'm going to easy ease these two sets and then go into the graph editor and then just pull that in a bit. By the way, if you're not seeing this shape line and instead you've got something like this, you can change the graph type here and it could be that you're looking at the speed graph, so you can change it to the value graph here. And then this graph is the inverse of the other one. So what this means is the steeper the graph is, the faster the movement and the letters are coming in quickly and then slowing down. So now if we overlap these keyframes, there'll be very subtle movement on the letters even when they're fully animated into place. So we've got keyframes at 0, 20, 40 and 60 frames. And then lastly, just going to add a little bit of shift on the X position. So add another position animator. I'm going to call this shift. And then just like the tracking, I'm not going to go into the range selector, just going to set that to be -100. And then at 60, set that to be 100, and then just preview that. And the reason for doing it here with the text animator, rather than just with like normal position keyframes, P for position, is we can still move this text layer around and it's not creating any rogue keyframes for us. So if we have this sort of, pretty much centered on screen, and then the final animation looks like this. So that's our first word done. So the second one, we want to animate in the other direction. So I'm just going to duplicate this, move the duplicate down. Change it to right justified. And then we go into the text animators and swap the on and the off and rename them. Then press U for the keyframes, change them to linear, so control click on them, and then I'm gonna swap them over. And finally, select all the keyframes apart from the tracking and right click, keyframe assistant, time reverse keyframes. So now that's animated on from the right. And then we just need to easy ease these as before. If like me, you've got Flow or a similar plugin, you can copy the curves of these keyframes and apply them to these. But if you don't, it only takes a second to go in and do it manually. They don't need to be exact. The whole animation is quite a loosey-goosey approach anyway. So I'm just going to preview that. So that looks okay. Let's just get the rest of our text in now. So I'm going to move these up and then just duplicate them. This is where I really wish I'd started with this part of the animation, which more accurately represents my state of mind 95% of the time. So next we're going to put our type on a path, just make it look a bit more kooky. So I'm going to solo the effortless and then grab our pen tool, just zoom out and just draw a simple path, and can either uncollapse down, find the path options, drop it onto there, then just bump the first margin across a bit so it's centered. We can tweak this later. Or what you can do is, I'm going to give this one a different path, because there's no shortcut. You can always type in path and then just drop this down here. And then here, just bump up or down the last margin, and move that down. So now I want to make these all 3D layers and then get a camera in. And the camera I'm using is a 15mm. 15mm is considered an ultra wide angle lens. You'll have seen films with this effect, especially if you're a Terry Gilliam fan. The result will be limited with flat 3D layers like this, but it will still make for a potentially more interesting look for your scene. If you haven't considered using different lens settings for cameras in After Effects before, or what they do, you might want to play around or do a bit of research. This video from Studio Binder, for example, is a good place to start. We'll look at lens distortion more later when we bring our animation together, but for now I'll OK this. As for placing your text and having it move along the paths, just move the text around, rotate it, bring it closer to the camera or move it further away. See what works for you. And you'll likely want to tweak things depending on what footage you choose to bring in anyway. I'm actually looking forward to seeing what you create with these techniques because it likely won't look the same as mine. So please do comment below if you've got something to show or hit me up on my channel.
No.
As I mentioned before, the wide angle lens will distort layers as you bring them close to the camera. One thing I experimented with early on in the process was using a very shallow depth of field on the camera. I ultimately ditched it, but it gave the scene a slightly woozy feeling. I've included this setup in the project file if you want to take a look. Speaking of which, if you want to follow along exactly, I definitely recommend downloading the project file if you haven't already. Saying that, here are the settings I ended up with for these two layers. And now we're going to do the other two. And just going to give this one a slightly different mask path. I'll spare you the scintillating sight of me creating another mask path and we'll just skip ahead. And we'll set the text on that mask path as before. And just bump up the first margin. And then I'm gonna just copy that onto this one. We'll skip ahead again, and I've just adjusted the mask path and moved the text along it. And these are the values that I ended up with. So now if we preview that. So the effortless text here hasn't animated off completely, but that doesn't matter because I'm going to cover it up with footage clips anyway. Next I'm going to offset these layers a little bit. Preview that again. That's just enough time to read the text, but this is going to be a looping animation, so the idea is that people are going to watch it hopefully more than once or twice. So this is what your text can look like with just simple text animators and type on a path. But I'd also encourage you to go into the effects and just try out some of these distortion effects. When I was working on my animation, I tried a handful with no particular result in mind. I just wanted to see if anything interesting came with them. This is a sample of just a handful, and I particularly love the liquefy effect. I think it's underappreciated. But there's obviously a lot more you can play and experiment with. So in this comp here, what I've done is I've added CC split and twirl to some of the layers. And what I've done is I've pre-comped a couple of these text layers and then just added a corner pin effect just to amplify the distortion a little bit. And then this layer here, this is what it looks like without, and then I've just added a CC split just to make it a little bit more goofy. Even if it doesn't work out, I'll often bookmark an effect or animation and might revisit it for a future project, or just take time to play around with different effects and keep an After Effects project full of weird experiments.
My experiments did not turn out quite like yours.
So next we're going to add these graphical accents to the type, and because we're using text animators, they're procedural, so this is really quick to do. So I'm going to grab the effortless type, duplicate and solo that, then change this to a typeface that supports triangles and maybe other shapes. And I'm on a PC, so if I've got number lock on, and then if I press Alt and 31 on the number keypad, gives me a triangle. Then I'm gonna select that, copy, paste 1, 2, 3, 5. So we've got 20 of those. So I want them to face to the right, so I'm gonna go in and add a rotation and put that at the top. And set that to be -90. So you don't always have to animate with text animators. So I'm going to set the font size to 30, and I'll just turn on the text and maybe increase the baseline shift to 130. And I wouldn't normally mess with these for type, but we can increase these just to change their appearance a bit. And also the kerning. So let's see what that looks like. So the idea is that it's just sort of subtly bringing on the text. So I'm going to change the color to white, and maybe even if I press UU, can adjust the first margin value. And maybe they're a bit too prominent up here. So we can add another animator. Which we're not animating, but just to reduce it, I'm going to set that to ramp up. Now that's done, you can copy and paste those triangles and do something similar for the creative text. And then I've used full stops to accent the master text. And that gives us this. Now we'll create this wow text for this footage clip I'm using. We'll use a text animator on the X position of the type as before, but also add a scale animator to bunch the letters up like this. Finally, we'll tweak the animator settings so the letters are pushed out and along. What we've got here is a comp with exactly the same settings as our master comp, with the footage clip that I've rotoscoped, and we're just bringing this in as a reference for the position of the text. So we're going to move this over to the bottom left. I'm going to add a text layer, type wow 456, and just change this typeface to cheap pine, but any similar typeface will do. 100. So reset these values. So again, as we did before, add a path and align the text to it. Just make sure it's left justified, and then just set the first margin so that it's here. So I'm going to animate the first margin over 40 frames. Then to have the letters come on, I'm going to add the typewriter animate in effect. And these text presets use text animators under the hood anyway. So this is just animating the opacity. So it gives us keyframes. I'm just going to set that to be over 15 frames, just so that the letters appear one by one as they push out from the left. Just for housekeeping, call that type on. And just to give the effect of these letters kind of being pushed out of the mouth, that sounds weird. I'm going to make sure that this isn't selected, otherwise it'll add it to this type on. So add a position. So we've got a new animator. Call this push out and set that to be -250, and then ramp down. So offset from 100, put that keyframe at the start, and then at 30 -100. And then just to give that a bit more oomph, I'm going to ease those. And set the ease low to be 100. So next I'm going to add a scale animator. Rename this, set that to be 200, and this, gonna set that to be round, and then ease high -50, ease low 25, and then offset that from -100 at frame 0, and then at 35. Look at that. And then this we're going to ease again. give it that shape. Let's have a look at that. Then to have the letters traveling along this path that we've set, add another position animator. Call this one off. Set this to be 4000 on the X. Set this to be ramp up. Offset of 100. And then over here, frame 40, minus 100. Set the ease load to be 100. Just have a look at that. Again, just to tweak the timing a little bit. Gonna give it something like this, just so it lingers a little bit. And that gives us this. Wow! Wow! As I mentioned before, with text animators, we can easily move and scale our layers without having to worry about row keyframes. We'll look at pulling this collage look together shortly, but for my footage clips, I use this dot halftone pattern as an overlay. It's a fudge, but the footage is so small in the composition, the viewer really won't notice the difference. You can build effects or use plugins which give you a proper halftone effect. Anyway, with that applied, the end result looks like this. Now we'll create this text, but we can reuse some of the animators we've already made. For this, we'll have the letters being pushed out to the left, and we'll also add a Wiggly selector to give us this erratic random effect on the scale and rotation. We'll start by duplicating our wow comp, and we'll call this one, I'm going to get rid of all the text animators. So the good thing about text animators is you can copy them from one layer to another, and you can even save them as presets. If you particularly like something that you've done, go up to animation and save animation preset with those animators selected. Call this wow. So I've created a folder in presets, which you can't see at the moment. If we save our FFX file there, and then close and reopen After Effects, we've now got that folder with the presets that we can apply to our text. Over time, as you become more familiar with text animators, you can gradually build up a library of presets which will potentially save you time on future projects. We actually don't want these, although we'll use one or two. So I'm going to go to Animation, remove all text animators, and I'm just going to bring in the video reference for this. So if you haven't seen it, this is Matthew Modine in Full Metal Jacket, Vietnam film that Stanley Kubrick shot in East London.
My God, how boring.
So this time the text is going to go over to the left. So I'll draw a mask path and add the type to that as before, and then make sure it's right justified. So let's add a position animator to that. And as before, call this push out. And I'm going to set this to minus 600. Ramp down. Just keyframe this from minus 100 over 25 frames. Let me turn off the audio and just adjust the ease value on that. I'm going to copy and paste the type on from our wow text and just shift these keyframes so they're both aligned. I find it's easier wherever possible to have multiple keyframes aligned on the same frame rather than randomly spread around, but then I'm massively anally retentive. Next we're going to add scale. This one's going to be round. Set the scale to be 400. Minus 50 on the high, 50 on the ease low, and then keyframe it from 0 to 35 frames. So to have the letters animate off, I'm going to duplicate the push out animator, rename this off, and then change this to 1000. Just going to shift these keyframes. So the last one's at 35, so 10 to 35. And just so they animate off completely, add another property, scale, and have that to 0. So to give some randomness to these letters, and kind of sell the whole frustration shouting thing, I'm going to add a Wiggly selector to this. So I'm going to have that affect the rotation and also scale. So let's set that to 200 and the rotation to, let's say, 70. Then over here, we're going to add a Wiggly selector, delete the range selector, so we've now got this randomness on the letters, and we can bump up the wiggles per second and maybe keyframe these min and max amounts. So sort of gets crazier as he screams, and maybe even add a position to that. Maybe keyframe this value off so as the letters go off, they're more aligned. So set that, push that over here, and then just set that to be 0. So I might just adjust the type on. Yeah, okay, that looks okay. Now we can place those text animations into our scene along with the footage clips. How you want to organise things is up to you. You could have all your layers in your main scene, or pre-compose some elements such as this woman and the wow text. If we take a peek at my project file, for this transition I thought it'd be fun to rotate the clips around this shape layer. There's a lot going on, so it was easy to pre-comp this. Because the type is all procedural, to make our animation loop we can simply duplicate all these layers and type what we want for the other stage of the animation. Delete what we don't need and make adjustments as necessary. Learning how to spell helps. Then to loop the animation seamlessly, what we can do is pick a point in the timeline. Doesn't matter where, but it's easier if all the text is in place and legible. Then I'll mark this first group of assets with the asterisk key and then duplicate them and then move them across and just get a transition here that I'm happy with, where the text is sort of overlapping a bit as one set goes out and the other set goes in. And then we've got our loop points, which I'll mark with timeline markers. So we can just make sure that it loops. Then obviously when we add footage and shape layers, just make sure that they loop in the same way. I added a couple more tweaked text animations to these clips. One thing you should know before finishing your animation is I didn't really have a plan for mine. I had the basic idea of animating this text into this and having film clips which underscored both scenes, which now that I look at them in this context, I realise are mostly from the 80s. Wow. What can I say? It's my era. This was an unpaid personal project, just for fun. If you're creating anything for commercial work, you'll obviously need permission for anything you use. Alternatively, you can use films which are in the public domain. There are films which are out of copyright for various reasons. Some are old and haven't been renewed. Others had copyright errors which meant they immediately entered the public domain.
Which one are you?
I'll spare you a long nerdy detour on copyright laws in different countries. You'll find some useful links for this in the description below if you want to look into this more. You can download some from the Library of Congress, for example. I'll just say that this list contains films by Kubrick, Hitchcock, Francis Ford Coppola, Sam Peckinpah and John Huston. Otherwise, I talk more about public domain assets generally in this video on my channel. In it, you'll find a collection of resources for free graphic and video assets, the sort of stuff which would be perfect for a collage style animation like this. Next, we'll look at how to bring this all together. add in shape layers and random animated elements, transitioning between footage clips, time remapping the animation, and creating an audio track using a mix of clips and stock effects. There's way too much going on to do a step-by-step, but if you want a deeper dive into any particular technique, you can view the whole process for this animation at my sister channel, the Video Shop Long Play. This is where I upload unedited workflows for most of my animations. This one took over 20 hours. You can see where I've tried things out and how the design evolved. I don't present this as an ideal workflow, far from it. It's just my hacky way of working. One of my weird idiosyncrasies is that I design in After Effects, if you can even call it design. I find I can quickly iterate that way. The shapes were influenced by One's work. I used them to fill out the scene and cover the cropping on the footage clips. I used mesh warp to help a couple fit to the shapes I had in mind. These are all simple geometric shapes, with grid and fractal noise effects on top, animated wave warp for this one, and drawn elements. Again, you're probably sick of hearing me say this, but just play around and have fun. Throw textures and patterns onto shapes until you get something you're happy with. To have these footage clips transition like this, I couldn't think of a way to do it with effects. There might be, maybe one of you can let me know. What I did was create a pre-comp at HD size to drop the footage in, then have 10 instances masked off and staggered in time, animating in from the right and off to the left. Then bring that and another clip I want to loop into a new composition and make sure to check continuous rasterization. So finally, when you bring that comp into your scene, again with continuous rasterization checked, they'll animate on and off like this. You can then easily duplicate those comps and use them for the other transitions, for example these clips. This is what happens if you don't have continuous rasterization checked. Next, I threw what I can only describe as random nonsense into the mix, mostly to add little touches to the footage clips. Some were animated shape layers, repeaters on path shapes and ellipses. Others were scribbles, which you can animate in different ways. One method I used was using motion sketch and drawing a null randomly around the screen, then copying the position path of that null onto a mask path of a solid, then adding the stroke effect. Then I used this expression on the mask path to wiggle it. I wasn't happy with that effect, so instead I used the scribble effect. I did a few variations and comped them together. When you're animating something, you always consider where and how it will be seen. For example, if you have text, will it be viewed on a phone or in a stadium? With or without a voiceover. I designed this to be a looping animation, so hopefully viewed a few times. So it's deliberate that it may take a couple of viewings to properly take in all the type and the other elements. The idea was to throw in little details and touches which reward repeat views. You can judge whether or not I achieved that.
Stop it, please, I beg you!
I really can't emphasize enough, if this inspires you to create your own collage style animation, and I really hope it does, don't treat this as a blueprint. Your animation could use stills instead of footage, and you could really swap out any of these elements for anything that feels right to you. Unlike, say, rewiring a house, there is no right or wrong approach. As I always tell students, the fun is throwing stuff in and seeing what sticks. Try not to overthink things. All you should be thinking is, am I having fun? And if it's a personal project, presumably like me, you've chosen a theme that you're interested in or passionate about. Collage style animation can be forgiving for non-fluid frame rates, and even mixing frame rates. So when I wanted to fine-tune the timing of the animation overall, to make it easier, I time remapped the whole thing. I extended the duration by about a second and adjusted the graph curve so it slowed down slightly on the main scenes. If you want a deeper dive into time remapping, I explore it more in this video on my channel. It's a great workflow hack I use a lot and can be a real time saver. No pun intended. Then in the same comp, I added an animated paper overlay on top, set to multiply at 50% opacity, and some grain on both the background solid and then at 50% opacity on top of the whole thing. The sound design was really fun as well, and I approached it in the same way as the animation, which is to say haphazardly with no plan. I pulled together some audio clips. These ones for Positive.
Wow, where'd you get this?
That's maybe the greatest line reading ever. This from Dodgeball.
That's rad.
This is glorious. There's footage online of Henry Thomas auditioning for E.T. Then at the end, Steven Spielberg says,
"Okay, kid, you got the job."
And these for Negative.
Oh, idiot.
This sound effect from Motion Array. And this clip from Meantime, which is a Mike Leigh film.
Where's this meant to be anyway?
Honestly, if all I achieve with this video is to introduce you to the films of Mike Leigh, I'll be happy. I mean, Joey might not.
Well, you've sort of wasted everyone's time, really, haven't you?
A site you might find useful if you want specific audio clips from films and television is Play Phrase Me. It won't give you anything back for motion design, but
You're a great teacher.
I wanted the sound design to be almost a collage in the same way as the visuals, and obviously reflect the film nerd aspect of the project. And this is the end result.
That's right. Okay, kid, you got the job.
It's idiot.
What's this meant to be anyway? That's right. Okay, kid, you got the job.
It's idiot.
What's this meant to be anyway? That's right. Okay, kid, you got the job.
I hope you found this useful. If you have any questions, pop them in the comments below and I'll do my best to answer them. Do check out schoolinmotion.com for courses and resources that will prepare you for industry standard practices within the motion design world. Last but not least, do remember to subscribe to School of Motion and my own personal video shop channels for more tutorials and tips like this. Thanks for watching, see you again soon.